Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm Phil Kirkbride, and today joined by Adam Jones and Chris Beesley as we chew the fat over all the major talking points at Goodison Park. And of course, it is all about Project Restart. Will this season resume? If it does, how does it resume? And maybe will it resume at all? Much to discuss. The events of the Premier League meeting on Monday threw up a number of talking points, and we'll go through them and try and make some sense, if possible, of what's going on and maybe what will go on. First of all, to discuss this on the pod, lads. Chris, I'll start with you first, mate. Mm-hmm. On a personal level, do you have an appetite to see the season come back around June time? Or do you feel that the season should just be finished and we should, like France are doing, Holland are doing, and Belgium, wait until it's safe to restart? Wait until to launch the new season and forget about this one now?
It's strange because I think my thoughts have changed over time. When we started off, I thought, yes, let's wait as long as it takes for it to be safe. This season's 3/4 of the way through. Let's get it finished. Even if it takes going into the back end of the year and what would normally have been 2020-21 season. But the more I've heard about all the weird and wonderful ways these fixtures might be played, and I use those words euphemistically, my appetite has waned in that we've seen the death figures rise. We're now more deaths than any other country in Europe, second only to the USA. And this idea that football is just trotted out like performing seals almost. One thing that didn't sit right with me, and there's talk that it might not be happening now, was the whole neutral grounds. Because I understand, first of all, we wanted to have the fans in, then we quickly realised that wasn't going to be possible at all, and might not be possible for a long time now. Certainly in the short-term future. So we got our heads around that. Okay, they're going to have to be empty stadiums, but we at least thought that this format, which has been the bedrock of the football league, home and away fixtures, you play every other team twice, once at your ground, once at their ground, for 130 years, might be compromised by this idea of the neutral grounds, and then the various other sort of really bizarre suggestions like shortened games and things like that. So I think it is best that we at least try to do this, but if it can't be done properly, then there are issues for me.
Adam, how has your opinion changed, like Chris's, over time? What's your thoughts on whether you feel football should be coming back next month?
I think I've got to completely agree with what Chris says. I think he was absolutely spot on. I think, a few months ago, when football was brought to an end, you were just thinking to yourself, oh, right, I can't wait for football to get back. Let's just move through this and, get the football season back underway as quickly as possible. And as Bees said, this season's 3/4 of the way through. I think the focus should have been on this season rather than moving on to next season and what have you. But, the more this has gone on, and, as Bees quite rightly said, we've got more deaths than anyone in Europe now. We're only second to the US in the whole world. Like, the idea of bringing football back into this environment just doesn't sit right with me. It seems a bit self-serving to be thinking that football is the thing that's going to unlock the morale of the country. There's so many people in this country who just aren't football fans, and they don't really care about football. I know there'll be millions of people who do care about football, but there'll be just as many people who just don't really care about the football season coming back. And to all the rigmarole of all the teams having to go through so many tests, when we're still seeing frontline NHS workers aren't getting the right amount of tests or protective equipment. Surely that should be the focus rather than giving this to football players or people who work for clubs to bring back let's be honest, a non-essential service. So I it just doesn't sit right with me. And as Chris rightly says as well, the neutral grounds idea, that just was a bit of a non-starter for me as well, because you're talking about the integrity of the competition, but that seems to mean for the higher ups in the Premier League, that only seems to mean, all right, well, let's just finish the games. That seems to be the only thing that affects the integrity of the competition. But if you're having let's say Everton's first game back from this break would be against Liverpool. How is it fair that Everton have had to travel to Anfield this season, but Liverpool wouldn't have to go to Goodison this season? That surely affects the integrity of the competition. So yeah, there's a lot of really strange ideas that are floating around, and there's still so many issues that need to be sorted. I just can't see how it's going to be back by June.
Chris, we'll come back to neutral venues, but Adam touched on it. The government seemingly firmly believe that a return of Premier League football will, I'm sort of paraphrasing the quote here, lift the nation's spirits.
I'm sure it will lift the spirits of all the thousands and thousands of football fans who wanted to get the football fix, haven't we? We've had more than our fair share of nostalgia matches, watching games from years gone by, and it's never quite the same, is it, when you know what the final result's going to be? But beforehand, it's strange, though, isn't it? It depends what sort of football will it be. Like we've spoken about already. You can't have it that it is the full package, and football is nothing without the fans, and that's a massive factor, not having those fans in the stadium. But that can't be helped at the moment. So if we're going to have it, it would be football without the fans in the stadium. But as both Adam and myself have said, if we're going to be compromising issues with all these other factors into play, I mean, is it really going to be that great of a spectacle? What it would do is, I guess, that there's going to be a lot of games televised. Nearly all the games would be televised if they do come back. So there'll be plenty for people to be watching. But having done an article in recent days, I believe most of them still would be on the paid-for channels. There was this idea that we were all going to be able to watch all these games for free. I presume season ticket holders at least will be able to do that. That would only be fair.
Well,
but yeah, this idea that it's all going to be on the subscription channels. It might not be the so-called festival of football that it's been made out to be. Certainly, given that people obviously can't watch them in the pub at the moment.
Well, just that's a really interesting point, Bees, about season ticket holders. What do we do in that respect then? Because it seemed logical to me at the start of this that if games were to go behind closed doors, then season ticket holders should be given access to a live feed of the game. But if clubs are then going to offer refunds on season tickets, does it then become ever more complicated to then still provide a feed for those who say, we don't want a refund, we just want to watch the game? Where does that end? And that seems like an absolute legal, logistical minefield.
Yeah, it's all unprecedented, isn't it? We're in uncharted waters, and sort of every respect, whether you're talking about society as a whole or football here. I would think whatever happens, for me, you've got to give access to those people who've got the season tickets, even if you've given them a refund. I think that's the least they deserve, is to at least be given an opportunity to watch these games in some shape or form.
Adam, so of course, so let's bring people back up to speed. We talk about neutral venues, but of course, at Monday's Premier League meeting, it was decided that the Premier League would go back to the government after some serious opposition from, I think, all clubs to some extent, but I think the feeling was it was around 12 heavily opposed to neutral venues. The Premier League said they'll go back to discussions with the government this week around ditching the neutral venues idea and following the Bundesliga example and using grounds as normal, of course, but behind closed doors matches. Is there not? Is the big issue? The big issue I can think of, I don't know if you agree. It was raised by the mayor, of course, a couple of weeks ago. It's being able to control potential for crowds to gather outside of grounds while these games are going on, before or after. Is that an insurmountable hurdle, or is that something that everybody's going to have to find a resolution for if neutral venues is off the table completely?
I don't think it's an insurmountable hurdle. I think it is something that people are going to have to be prepared for. I think we saw it in the Paris Saint-Germain against Borussia Dortmund Champions League game. Saw the congregation outside the stadium for that one. But I don't think they will have been necessarily prepared for that to happen. Like in this case, it will be extremely prepared for it to happen, and I'm sure they'd be able to bring in a number of measures. The main issue that I can see with going to the German model is the way that things have worked out in Germany is very different to the way that things have worked out in the UK. You know, they seem to be a lot further down their respective curve than we are. So I just don't see how we can, in such a short space of time, how we can modify ourselves to be able to actually follow their model properly. You know, and we're still seeing problems with the German model as well. You're seeing the Dynamo Dresden squad are all quarantining themselves now because of three players have picked up the virus, and that could respectively happen to one of the Bundesliga teams. We just don't know how it's going to work down the line. So I think maybe trying to move ourselves towards the German model and trying to put up this German model as the bastion of success, that's maybe a little bit too soon even in itself. Whenever we seem to turn towards a possible solution, there seem to be 6 or 7 more problems that seem to rise up. It's a really weird situation at the minute.
Yeah, we will watch the return of the Bundesliga this weekend with a keen eye, won't we, and see how it goes down. But of course, Chris, just picking up on Adam's point, last night, Richard Masters, the CEO of the Premier League, he'd been asked about the potential of players, Premier League players, testing positive for coronavirus, and would that inevitably lead to a Dynamo Dresden-style shutdown of the club? But he said, theoretically, it would only require that individual to self-isolate, and the squads wouldn't have to. But for you, that felt to me like it was almost being a little bit idealistic, because surely if he's come into contact with his teammates, and more than that individual would be testing positive, wouldn't they?
Yeah, we saw at the very start the outbreak. Mikel Arteta, of course, former Everton player, now Arsenal manager, he had the virus, and that came shortly after Arsenal had their game against Olympiacos, and the Olympiacos owner, who also owns Nottingham Forest, had supposedly met some of the Arsenal people then. So yeah, all their teammates families. I mean, it goes on and on, isn't it? The government talking about this figure of how the virus is transmitted and keeping that below 1. But yeah, if you think about the way it does go from person to person, yeah, there's a whole network of people who could be involved both inside and outside the club. So yeah, it's a dangerous game, isn't it? You just say, oh well, that one individual self-isolates. We've seen Brighton and Hove Albion in recent days, number of players, I believe the last one was actually one of their senior players, to have caught the virus. So it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, you might end up that we play the fixtures, and then there are games called off again because people at certain clubs have got it at certain times, and the games can't be fulfilled.
And sorry, Adam, I was just going to say, does a virus which has created a global pandemic, does that have to be classified as an injury in that respect? If say example, we lost Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin to a positive coronavirus test, do the Premier League and everybody else just say, well, sorry, that's just an injury? But that could be the difference in the games between, we could argue finishing 7th and finishing 8th and what have you, and all that goes with that. I mean, are there not potential legal ramifications, people challenging games going ahead if squads have been depleted of key players because of a virus?
Well, you'd presume so, wouldn't you? Because as I said earlier, this is a non-essential sort of activity, really. To bringing football back, we would, like, the country would survive if football didn't come back for the next few months. So it's a non-essential activity. I suppose it would just be classed as a normal injury, but I just can't see, as you say, how the legal ramifications of that would work. In terms of what Richard Masters said, it just seems like a huge attitude change for me inside the space of 2 months. Like, this was why the Premier League was suspended in the first place, wasn't it? For the danger of, one player maybe getting it and then a whole squad has to isolate themselves. Like, that was the whole reason that we brought the Premier League to a stop in the first place. And we all decided that was completely the right decision. It was for the good of the whole population of the country, and et cetera, et cetera. Why has that changed in the space of 2 months when we've only seen the death figures rise and rise? We've apparently come over the the peak of this curve now, but you just can't predict what's going to happen in the future. I just don't see how we've had I don't see the evidence there to have such a huge attitude change in the space of 2 months. You know, if a player in a squad was to, you know, test positive for these coronavirus symptoms, that surely means the whole squad should have to be isolating, and then you open up a whole new can of worms if that happens, you know, in the middle of these remaining games. It just baffles me, to be honest.
Well, it's a salient point that Phil makes, in that, do we treat it like any other injury? Because if a player has the flu, for instance, I mean, that'd just be like an injury. It's tough luck, isn't it? You get over that, but which I suppose in extreme cases, the flu could kill you. But this is something which can kill people, and is killing people all the time. Now, how do you differentiate between like regular injury and then coronavirus-induced illness? Does it just get classed as tough luck if you've only got the one out? It's like as if he'd stubbed his toe or something. He just can't play that week. I mean, dangerous ground.
So, of course, I'm sure everybody listening to this was aware the government obviously said on Monday that no professional sport would be able to return until at least June the 1st, and of course it will be behind closed doors. But of course, seemingly, although as we all witnessed, some rather vague and confusing guidelines. But I think the thrust of what they're trying to ease the lockdown is to try and help some of the economy back on its feet a little bit. Football, of course, is a significant element of economy, and for clubs, Adam, you know, this threat, if you like, or this danger of not completing the season comes at a cost of £700+ million in TV money, plus all of the other millions in match-related revenues that would be lost. Clubs, potentially Burnley, have made very stark admissions about how a failure to end the season would impact them almost critically. The chairman was saying, from this point of view, for the game, does football does it have to find a way to come back?
I think this is the biggest argument, isn't it, for bringing football back, because you can't argue with the financial trouble that, you know, a lot of clubs across the football pyramid. It's not just the Premier League, of course. You know, I think the main focus is on the Premier League because it's got the most amount of money involved in it, with all the TV rights, etc. But, you know, you're going to see a lot of financial difficulties, you'd presume, especially in like the likes of League One and League Two. So, you know, I just think that the FA, the EFL, the Premier League, they've got to find some sort of financial solution which is going to be able to bail out a whole lot of clubs in the coming months. It's not just going to be Premier League clubs, and it is really tough. It's a really tough situation. I still think the health and safety of everyone should be prioritised first, but, you know, it's all well and good, you know, an Everton fan may be saying that because, you know, Everton have obviously got financial backing of someone like Farhad Moshiri. You know, not everybody's going to have a billionaire financial backer. So, you know, we could find the Premier League clubs in a couple of months down the line, you know, as you say, Burnley have been very vocal about this. You know, they could be in real danger. So I think there's just got to be some sort of blanket. There's got to be some sort of blanket solution which is going to be able to accommodate clubs from all divisions across the pyramid, because it's not just going to be a Premier League issue, but it seems that the Premier League is the most likely division to come back at the minute.
So we understand it as at present. A meeting next Monday, May the 18th, could potentially deliver a vote of the 20 clubs on how and in what form, if football comes back in June. Chris, a story you wrote this morning. UEFA had given domestic leagues and competitions a deadline of May the 25th to deliver a yes or no about completing or cancelling seasons. But now UEFA seem to be softening that deadline, flexible, and understandably, people have reacted to that by going, well, why was there a deadline in the first place? And isn't this just another sign that this is just going to go on and on and on until the point where everybody just decides it's not possible?
It is going on and on. Like you say, that was a deadline that the UEFA chief was actually speaking about a month ago, and things are changing so quickly on a week-to-week basis. And from what we understand now, they understand that it is a very nuanced situation. There's that many factors in play that they are willing, to be a bit softer on this approach and give the Premier League a bit of time, because obviously the Premier League are dependent on what the government's saying. At the moment, they're saying that sport can resume from the start of June, but if these relaxed measures of lockdown don't go to plan, well, we might have a relapse and that might get put back. The UEFA guidelines were built in because of course, the whole qualification process for the UEFA competitions next season, because we're going to have a point here, or we're going to possibly reach one. Whereas the English season, unlike some of the other European ones who have just pulled up stumps and finished as they were, could be encroaching into what would have been the start of the 2020-21 season. And we're already seeing possible changes in regards to the UEFA qualifications. We saw 3 years ago when Everton were in the Europa League, and that really early start to the season in July. I mean, you would Razumbarok in Slovakia. Yeah, that's if people are ploughing on with the plans for the start of next season, well, somewhere along the line, you've got to decide, well, enough's enough, and it either gets finished or it doesn't.
One thing that was voted on at Monday's meeting, Adam, was player contracts, and of course the issue of players whose contracts are due to finish on June the 30th. Of course, within the context of, if the Premier League does come back, it will be played well into July, possibly into August, we don't know, but well into July, wouldn't it, at this stage? So for Everton, this was quite an interesting and pivotal vote. The Premier League clubs decided that contracts can be extended, as FIFA had recommended, if both parties agree. Now, crystal ball time, City comes back in June, Everton have games left, take us through June, through July, maybe touching into August. Does the squad need Oumar Niasse? Does the squad need Cuco, Martina, senior players, with the potential for extra subs being allowed, for the potential danger of increased risk of injury, of course, virus, of course, because of this quick turnaround? Do Everton hand extensions to those two players?
Does the squad need them? No. Should they be handed new contracts? I think absolutely. I think this is such an unprecedented situation for everybody across football, and I think the importance of having that vote in yesterday's meeting was to bring clarity to the players in these sort of situations. Now, if you can't imagine what it must be like for a football player to be reaching, the closing months of your contract, and you could have had an injury throughout this season. You might not have been informed this season. Your future could be up in the air, and that must be a really worrying situation for a lot of players. And that could be the case for any players who could be playing for Everton as well. And I think Everton have almost got an obligation that they should say, right, these are the rules, but we will give you until the end of whenever this season is, and then you can have that clarity, and then you can move on as it would be at the end of any other season. I think that's probably the right way to go about things, because I'd hate for it to be, you come round to June when the season's going to start up again, and you've got some sort of contract dispute between a club and a player in the middle of this crisis as well. I don't think that's the right way to go about things. So I think, while the squad probably doesn't need the likes of Oumar Niasse and Cuco, Martina, I think even if it came down to it, I probably would offer them a new contract, until the end of the season at least.
But Chris, Everton, with Marcel Brands leading this pursuit of trying to reduce a wage bill and a squad size, will not have factored in an extra 6 to 8 weeks payment for two players that he was, a couple of months ago, had already probably penciled a line through their names for next season because they weren't going to feature. So from the club's point of view, why should they be paying 80 grand plus a week for 6 to 8 weeks on two players that, in all likelihood, won't play?
It's bizarre, isn't it? The Oumar Niasse story. He's been loaned out a couple of times now, and he didn't get his locker, of course, from Ronald Koeman, and just lingering on for those few extra weeks this summer. Can't get rid. I mean, at some point, before 2020's out, I presume his time at the club will finally come to an end. But like you say, both parties have to agree. Maybe they will be just take it as a business decision and be harsh and say, well, you're not part of the plans. Whereas somebody like Djibril Sidibé, who is in on loan, he is part of the plans. We'll keep on paying his wage so long as Monaco agree to that. But sorry, lad, you're out the door. I don't know what Marcel Brands is thinking, or the club's pay masters. Yeah, as Adam says, it might not be the right decision. Might be harsh. I don't know. They might base it on a case to case basis and say, okay, yeah, Sidibe in, Niasse, Martina out. Don't know.
Yeah, it could be a balancing act in that respect, couldn't it? If Valladolid want to pay Sandro's wages for another 6 weeks and Schalke want to pay Kenny's wages, I suppose that's off the books, isn't it? That would have come back on.
Well, it's interesting how it's going to work with other leagues, isn't it? Because would Monaco have the right to recall Sidibe? Because they don't have to follow our rules necessarily, do they?
Well, no, and this is the grey area because FIFA only made recommendations. They obviously don't have the legal power to impose a blanket decision across all leagues, do they? That's why they recommended it. But I guess it's in Monaco's interest to allow us to continue paying Sidibe for another 6 to 8 weeks because obviously he wasn't in their plans. But you're right. If, for example, their two other right backs suddenly got injured or heaven forbid, contracted the virus in the next few weeks, and up to the end of June, I suppose they're well within their rights to recall it. But again, this is why maybe Everton need to act fast if they haven't already done so and make a decision and try and tie him down, get that agreed. Obviously, we know about Bainsey, and there was talk about a new deal before this suspension, and we would expect that would pick up. What about Stekelenburg? He's the other one on this list.
It's really interesting, isn't it? The goalkeeper situation as it stands is just a bit of an intriguing one. I think a lot of it would depend on Losel's future as well, wouldn't it? Because he's obviously came to the club and not made an appearance yet for Everton in a competitive game. Sent out on loan to Huddersfield to be injury cover for them after Camille Grabada's injury. Doesn't look like Huddersfield will be able to afford him, going by what their chairman was saying a few months ago. So it looks like he's going to come back to Everton. But is he going to be able to get that chance to challenge Pickford? Are we going to sign somebody else in that position to try and challenge Pickford? Are we going to bring up João Virginia, of course, who had his own loan spell earlier this season, which didn't really work out at Reading? But he's come back to the under-23s and he's started performing again under Unsworth. So could he maybe step up to the first team activities and start working as a backup? It's just so interesting. And then you throw Stekelenburg into the mix, who's always been a solid keeper since he's been at the club. He's stepped in on a number of occasions and provided solid backup. And I've got no doubt that he probably will be solid backup again next season. It's just whether we want to sign somebody who's going to be able to push Pickford that extra little bit. Somebody who's going to maybe challenge him for that number one spot. But again, we've got the financial constraints. Do we need to sign players in other positions before we prioritise the signing of a goalkeeper? It really is an intriguing question. The more this situation goes on with the coronavirus, maybe it becomes a little bit more likely that Stekelenburg will be given another year or so on his contract. I don't think it'd be the worst decision in the world by any means.
And Bees, just on that before we finish, Adam mentioned the uncertainties of how the transfer market will look, the financial landscape of football. We don't know how much Everton will have to spend and how much of that transfer kitty will be impacted by not necessarily being able to sell players that perhaps a couple of months ago had been on the list and, profit would have been expected on X, Y, and Z. With Sidibe, as it stands, as we understand it, of course, there's an agreed fee there for Everton to trigger in the loan deal if they want him. Does that make a decision easier for Everton? Because they know if we give £12.7 million, €50 million, we've got this player. There's no uncertainty about sending him back and then trying to find somebody, haggling, negotiating, and then running into a situation where, come the start of next season, we were unable to find another right back to challenge with Coleman. Of course, we're factoring in the assumption that Kenny may not be back in the squad. We don't know. We don't know what the plans are there. But is Sidibe more of a sure bet? Because we know what we're getting, we know how much it's going to cost, and he's there.
Yeah. I suppose he isn't, like you say, he is there, and he is a fixed price, and that you're not having to go to the clubs. But all the noises we keep hearing is that prices are going to go down this summer. That's what people keep telling us, because of the nature of the market. Right back is the one area which is still up for grabs. There's so many variables in there. What Seamus Coleman brings to the table, what John Joe Kenny, who the manager hasn't had a chance to see up close yet, what he could bring, and obviously Sidibe as well. It's genuinely is. It could be any one of those three. Could be first choice next season or another. So I don't know. Given that we keep hearing that the prices are going down, I'd be possibly inclined to wait. I mean, he's had some good moments. Sidibe obviously comes with a good pedigree at international level for France, but I think a lot of people remain unconvinced about what he does bring, and given his age now, should be at the peak of his powers. Perhaps they will just let it slide. See who else is out there, or at least have a little look at John Joe.
Of course, I mean, we haven't. Sorry, the very, very last one on another complicated issue. We haven't. We have not, of course, discussed the potential for Everton to say to Monaco, "No, you can have him back as of July the 1st." John Joe, you're coming back.
Yeah, that created a whole new issue, doesn't it? You know, will the Bundesliga season be finished by then? I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how their plans are meant to be working for the long term. But you know, you can imagine that Schalke certainly wouldn't be happy with John Joe being called back in that sort of scenario. You'd imagine maybe even John Joe wouldn't be all too happy with that scenario, because you know he's played so well for Schalke this season. I think he's started 23 of their 25 Bundesliga games this season, so he's been a huge part of their campaign. They're still in the running for the Champions League as well. You know, if it came down to it and he was called back, you know, it could be the case that he'd be quite unhappy with not being able to see that campaign through. So yeah, I think that would provide its own separate world of issues. I think I'd agree with Bees though in terms of Sidibe. I think he's been a decent enough signing for us this season on loan. You know, a good stopgap. But I think I'd be willing to take a little bit of a risk and try and bring in somebody different for the right back role in the summer.
Interesting, complicated issues from top to bottom, isn't there? And I'm sure the confusion will go on for some time longer, but hopefully next week, maybe, we might get a little bit more clarity on what's going to happen with the season and, of course, specifically with Everton. Chaps, thanks very much for your company, and thank you very much for listening. We're back again on Friday. You've been listening to the Royal Blue Podcast.